Okay. Oh, good. We're getting some more people joining us. Hi, everybody. Ricky, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, it's
Thanks for
good to
joining.
be here. And I've been traveling so much personal and professional travel. So I'm glad to be able to attend the meeting. I was thinking I was like I might have to get somebody else to step in, but I'm here. I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah, me too. Good to see you. Thanks for joining. Okay. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Um, I did send out an agenda. It's pretty short, so I don't think I'll just read from it. I don't think I need to share it on the screen. But I did, before we do just general updates from the group, I did want to add one update that John reminded me of. Thank you, John. That we do annual sort of progress reports on the Sustainability Action Plan, and we're due for our next update in terms of what progress we've made since last year. So Damon, I'm not sure if you've reached out yet or he's planning to. Unfortunately, he's been sick this last week. We're glad he could
I'm in
make
the
it
middle,
today.
so I've reached out to some people, and some people will be getting something from me soon.
Okay, great. Thank you. So yeah, I think we've got a lot of great things where we will have great progress in some areas. I think the decarbonization work, they've secured a lot of money. Dave and his group have secured a lot of money to get that rolling and an RFP out. We're going to hear from Transportation Services today on some of their fleet electrification progress, which is awesome. Travel Policy Working Group, ESC Governance Working Group, et cetera. And then there will be some areas where we really haven't made a whole lot of progress. And then we're also, just a reminder, we're sort of in this transition period before we do that big 5-year update, since the plan's on 5-year cycle. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. John, anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think that's fine. I just think we need to be accountable.
Yep, I agree. So expect Damon to be reaching out, and we will be publishing, hopefully in the next 2 months, month or two, that update on progress online. Okay, any general updates from the group before we get going? Things people want to share? Okay. Well, I wanted to have Marilyn, the next item on our agenda for initiative updates was to have Marilyn give just a brief update on the Travel Policy Working Group and some of their progress, which they'll be presenting in doing a formal presentation next week. Marilyn?
Yes, so our group, our ad hoc joint committee with the Faculty Council on Campus Planning and Stewardship and the ESC consists of, I guess, 8 of us, three faculty, one of whom is here, Jeremy, and a representative from medicine, who's here, Louise, and a representative from athletics and a graduate student. And we've pulled together what we're referring to as a bundle of strategies for reducing professional travel. And we presented that to the Faculty Council on June 1st, along with a justification for taking bold action and an explanation of the impacts of air travel. And it was fairly well received. So we're going to give pretty much essentially the same presentation, as Lisa said, to the ESC next week, and then ask for sort of an endorsement in principle, so we can then go for spend the summer turning that into a set of policies and getting input and feedback from various community members. We're planning to do a series of focus groups. That's it. Any questions?
Okay, good. Thanks, Marilyn. So as a reminder, if you're everybody should still be receiving sort of those cross invitational emails between committees. So even if you're not a formal ESC committee member, you know, you're more than welcome to join and participate next week. So that meeting's a week from today on the 21st from 2:30 to 4.
Marilyn, what was the response at FCUPS? Like, what was the reaction to the travel policy? Was it understood? Was there lots of engagement? Were there concerns?
You know, I've given 3 presentations before that. This one, there were fewer concerns. I think there was more specificity in our recommendations, so people could imagine them and, you know, felt like, yes, we need to do this, and there's some potential here for this to have an impact. So there were a few sort of familiar concerns, like the concern about if we have a surcharge that grants, federal grants often have a policy saying you cannot use grant money to pay that type of surcharge. So a few things like that, but overall it felt well received. Louise and Jeremy, any other impressions?
No, I agree. I felt like people were on board with it and wanted to think creatively about it, but it didn't. There was not fundamental pushback about the idea.
Mhm.
And I think you're right, Marilyn, just the fact that there was sort of more detail and the bundle was sort of fleshed out, the comprehensiveness of the approach seemed to resonate.
Okay, great. Thanks, Marilyn. And stay tuned or tune in next week if you want to see the formal recommendation from that working group. Okay. So next on the agenda, we wanted to have Lou give an update on the decarbonization resolution. So we did, I believe it was our last meeting. We spent the majority of the meeting working on that resolution, which I think we got a really good draft together. That sort of happened right before the student protests and the students chaining themselves to the power plant. And so anyway, Lou's going to give an update on where we're at with the decarbonization resolution.
Yeah, and I don't know that I have specifics as it relates to timing on what Anna Marie wants or plans to do. I'll speak maybe in more general terms in that regard, but I was with Anna Marie in one of the main sessions that she had with the ICA students, and I think including the president of ASUW and a reporter. That it was 7 people, but it was very, I think, healthy and productive interchange with the president, and it was an opportunity, I think, for her and I to talk a little bit about you know, big picture governance for the university, and a little bit about how decisions are made and need to be made in the context of impacts to all other responsibilities of the president of the university. Long story short, we are on a timeline that overlaps with a lot of other timelines with respect to our request for state funds. There's a process there. There's a process for our capital planning. And all of that is leading to some briefings that will develop over the summer and deliver to Anna Marie in the late summer, early fall with regard to the financing strategy and really the financing implementation plan for decarbonization, or in other words, our overall energy transformation implementation plan. We won't have the financing solved in the next couple of months, but what we need to give Anna Marie is more detail on what has to be done to raise the funding, which is roughly in the range of $700, $800, $900 million. Let's just call it $1 billion over the next decade to do this strategy. and what the impact on that level of investment might have on all of the other decisions and initiatives that the president needs to decide what we invest in. So it's a little bit of a tall order, but we're going to provide some additional information on what the impacts are going to be there that'll lead her to be more comfortable making a statement of commitment to climate action. And I should have started out with this, but backing up, she's fully committed to this. She's applauding the efforts that our team has been engaged in now for the last couple of years to get us to this point on developing the strategy and now generating the implementation plan and the financing strategy. And she's willing and is dedicating university resources to that work because she believes it's important work. What she is hesitant is probably not quite the right word. Where her reluctance to declare something today stands is that she does not want to be a president or a leader that makes broad claims without a better knowledge on what the impacts are going to be. So there's technical feasibility, which I think is pretty well understood, but there's also financial feasibility and impact financially to a commitment on how fast we go that she feels that she needs to be more fully informed on to declare something in whatever statement. And she wants to get to that point so she can, when she says we're going to do this, she plans to do it. And not to just say she's going to do it, and then 3 years later not be the president anymore and not be accountable for the declarations that she made. So I think that's a pretty mature perspective for her to be taking as the leader of the institution. And we're working to support the information she needs to declare that commitment. Maybe that's all a little bit more than you asked for, but that's where we are.
That's great. Thanks, Lou. Brian?
Lou, thanks for the update. I'm glad you had that conversation with her. So just making sure I'm putting the pieces together in my mind. So you feel like by the early fall, you'll be in a position to have enough meat on the bones related to the funding plan for decarbonizing the plant that she would then be in a position to be able to make the commitment?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let me clarify. I said we're not going to have it solved, that's for sure. We're going to have more information, more meat on the bones on options for implementation to finance this. I think what we need to show is for every type of funding source, whether it's debt, fundraising, state, central equity, IRA, CCA, et cetera, grants, we need to show for each of those funding sources that are potential, we need to kind of lay out the steps, the hoops that people need to jump through to move forward. We have to do some grant writing. We have to do application work to apply for the federal IRA money. We'll have more information on the level of effort and the work that needs to be done and the plan that I think she wants to see. I'm hoping that this is, and I'm expecting that this will suffice for giving her a feel for the level of effort and the steps we need to take to secure the funding, along with, it's $800 million, $1 billion, whatever, over the next 8 to 10 years. Where is the rest of the money that the university has access to? What is going to be impacted potentially that we're not going to be able to fund in the future? We won't have that answered precisely either, but more information I think will put her in a position where she feels better informed, and she's kind of committed to looping back with the students in the early fall or sometime in the fall. So that's kind of the driver more than anything. Was that vague enough for you?
That helps. Thank you.
Also, a quick
And-
question as well. One of the things I heard you say that kind of lit up my brain that sounds encouraging is if there would be central support for garnering the IRA, the dollars. I know that we need that in Dave's area. There's possibility for us in transportation. I can't imagine in operations globally relative to that. And we in facilities haven't always been known for our grant writing skills and pairing, but we are great with shovel-ready projects. So I just want to applaud any efforts that may be able to happen institutionally so we can marry these facility-based that haven't been there for, you know, decades opportunities with the federal dollars in a way that effectively scoop them up on the state and federal level.
Yeah, coincidentally, I maybe an hour ago sent a note back to Sarah Castro. She sent us a note today that we are officially qualified for federal IRA money. So my question was, all right, so what are our next steps? What do we need to do? What do you need from us to move forward? We need people like Sarah. We need people like Joe Daca. We need other people doing some up and down lifting, and we need to work together to support what each other needs to go grab this money. So that's what we want to lay out through the summer. Here's the plan on how we go about financing this thing, and here's who needs to do what.
Yeah, and just to like add a little more layers to all of that, you know, there's some, you know, dozen different tax incentive programs or payment credit programs through the IRA specific to different types of work. And they all have different rules with respect to when the work needs to be started by, when the work needs to be completed by. So doing a bit of a mapping exercise of the work that we need to do on our campus and which programs they're related to within the IRA, and then even within each one, there's anywhere from 30% to 70% of the project funding can come from the IRA tax credits, dependent upon elements of how the work is executed. And so there's a whole effort there to be done to try to figure out, do we think it's going to be 30% or do we think it's going to be 70%? And then of course, then the last part is that the IRA for us will be direct payments that come after the work is complete. And so it does need to fit into an overall financing strategy, because we would still have to come up with the upfront project financing costs, knowing that it could be repaid from the IRA payments afterwards. But then how does that whole issuance of debt or however we do that coincide with other efforts of the university? So anyway, there's just, I'm just giving some specifics of some of the things that really could be fleshed out over the next 3 or 4 months as it relates to that program that we're eligible for and the work that we want to do.
Thanks, Dave. Brian, how about Brian, you're the last comment, and I want to make sure that Danny has enough time to go through his presentation on Fleet's work. Go ahead.
You say, so Lou, so in the meantime, with what is the president's talking point related to the UW's decarbonization commitment when she's being pressed by students? Is the UW committed to zero carbon by 2035? Is her answer? I don't think it is, but is her answer stand by, we're evaluating that? Or is her answer, I'm committed, details to follow? Or kind of, what is the talking point related to the students at this point?
Yeah, she's not committed to anything specific as far as timelines and zero carbon. She's committed totally to the concept of doing what we need to do and doing our part. That's very vague, but yeah, it is kind of a standby as far as a 2035 zero, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think I'll add.
There was language in whatever her blog was recently that she wrote, and she committed to climate action on behalf of the university. But she didn't get specific.
Yeah, I think because the resolution was asking for almost what the students were asking for, which was an 80% reduction for scope 1 and 2 emissions by 2030 and a 95% reduction for those scope 1 and 2 emissions by 2035, that Anna Marie wanted, and a finance committee is going to be is starting based on that conversation that Lou had with Anna Marie. Because the Seattle campus central plant comprises 93% of our scope 1 and 2 emissions, that's where all the focus is on how do we finance that, if that's the real lion's share of our scope 1 and 2 emissions. So hopefully that helps for some folks that weren't here for when we were going through the draft resolution. Okay, great. Well, good discussion. Danny, I made you co-host, so you should be able to share your slides. If you can't, let me know.
Right, I'm assuming you can see those?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Yeah, thank you guys for inviting us here today. I'm Dan Eden. I'm the fleet manager here at UW. Excited to share some of the progress we've made so far in terms of our fleet electrification efforts, as well as our plans for the future. The information I have is broken down into these 5 kind of basic categories. We have electric vehicle procurement. We have some success stories from the previous year, some data analysis. The majority of it are these 3 large parking lot projects we have that are ongoing, and then a grant opportunity that we've been able to take advantage of. So I thought I'd start with just a brief overview of the fleet. We have 743 vehicles. Right now, 76 of those are electric. It accounts for about 10% of the fleet. Those are things like our Chevrolet Bolts and our Ford Focus EVs, as well as, a couple GEMs, a couple Leafs. We have 42 plug-in electric hybrids. Those are vehicles that, they run on battery for about 20 to 40 miles and then kick over to gas. So those are things like Prius Primes and the Ford C-Maxes. And then we also have 209 flex fuel vehicles, and those are vehicles that take E85. We're one of the few fuel islands that actually do offer that. So any vehicle that can take E85 is required to do so here at UW. That's about 28% of the fleet. I have those vehicles highlighted as they are what the state considers to be our alternative fuel vehicles. But we also have 98 just normal hybrids like Toyota Priuses and RAV4s. We have 46 diesel vehicles, mostly, buses, box trucks, a couple garbage trucks. We have actually been running R99 for about 4 or 5 years now, tagged onto a City of Seattle contract. So it is palm free. And then we also have 272 unleaded vehicles. So we really focused this year in the vehicle order and bumped up the amount of electric vehicles that we're purchasing each year. So far, we have received 21 of the Ford E-Transits. Most of them are going to facilities, but we did have, Housing and Food Services piloted one for us. We have the Henry Art Gallery utilizing one already, as well as Northwest Hospital has been really receptive to the electric cargo vans. We also have 12 Chevy Bolts have arrived recently. We actually have 32 of those total. They've been kind of our go-to EV sedan now since about 2019. It's been really successful for us, and I can get into a little bit more of that later. We also did order 9 of the Ford Lightnings. It's been a struggle to actually get them delivered, but the good news is we do have production locked in on 2. So 2 of them should be arriving here soon. And then we also have 3 Volkswagen ID.4s for a specific group that needed all-wheel drive as well as access to garages. Those should be here any day now as well. Those have been built. So this is a really important slide to me, or really important information. We took a look at our total maintenance costs for the past 5 years, including obviously labor, parts, commercial costs, because we don't work on everything here at Fleet. We have to send a lot of stuff out. And then we divided that by the miles driven for that particular vehicle class. And what we found is our electric vehicles, they are our cheapest or least expensive vehicle to maintain in the fleet, followed by our 2 plug-in electric hybrids, the Toyota Prius Prime as well as the Ford C-Max, and then followed by just normal hybrids, RAV4 and Toyota Prius. So the top 5 least expensive vehicles in terms of maintenance for our fleet and our actual data are these greener options. And then this slide here represents basically the percentage of miles driven each year by the fleet that are all electric. So we did actually start electrifying the fleet as early as 2015, but we are a campus fleet. Some of our vehicles don't get a ton of miles, but you can see in 2020 and then kind of towards the end of 2019 is when we partnered with Laboratory Medicine. They are a medical courier group. They typically do about 300,000 miles a year in their 10 to 12 vehicles. As a whole, our fleet does 3.3 million a year, so it's a significant portion. They were open to the idea of electric vehicles. We weren't able to electrify every single one of their courier routes, but got a bunch of them up and running with the Chevy Bolts. Right now, they're doing about 200 to 220,000 miles per year in those 10 Chevy Bolts, which kind of bumped our numbers up in 2020. And then in 2021, 2022, had some impacts with COVID. There were other departments utilizing electric vehicles that weren't operating them anymore. But for 2023, we are on track at least for, our most electric miles driven. That 12.6% represents about 270,000 EV miles, which we're on track to hit this year. And then to support all these new electric vehicles, we have 3 major projects in the works right now. The first of which is N26, or the Trail. 40% of our fleet is down in this area, belonging to UW facilities. And so currently I do have 10 level 2 chargers on the very south end of the trail, as well as 3 down in the fleet yard. But this project will add 38 additional level 2 chargers to the trail area to help support facilities and all these new vehicles. And then another important aspect of this project is security. So there will be fencing, gates, cameras, lights as part of this project. It's still being engineered, but it is on track to go out to bid in October. Another big project is E2 just across the street near U Village. The idea here is to add level 2 charging to the perimeter of the full lot. Then in the center, we'll have DC fast charging lanes. We hope to install 6 of the level 3 fast chargers. This project is also, in the engineering phase. The contractor found that we could save some of the parking stalls in the middle of it, even with the fast charging lanes. So we spec'd out a little stronger level 2 charger. So those will kind of be hoteling spots for some of the larger vehicles. We'll also be able to park like the buses and the trucks someday when those are electric in those fast charging lanes. So it'll be a good storage area and kind of operate more as like the new fleet fueling island will pretty much be E2. And then similarly to the trail, security will be part of this. There'll be fencing, cameras, RFID gates or AVI gates. And then the final project, which is happening simultaneously with the trail upgrade, is a solar canopy pilot in the E18 lot. This is a grant-funded project. It was up to 100 kilowatt. Closest they could get was 84. It will be connected into the grid, and it is being engineered to potentially expand and add additional infrastructure in the future. And then finally, we did pilot the Seattle City Light Fleet Electrification Program with them. Part of that is they introduced us to this rebate program for EV charging infrastructure, so basically the chargers, right? So we will be able to utilize these rebates as part of these projects. The maximum is $200,000 per year. For level 2s, it's $30,000 per project site. And then for level 3s, it's $100,000 per project site. And that's everything I have.
Questions for Danny?
No question, but just congrats. A lot of great progress on that program and great data.
It's been an exciting thing to see, and Danny's work, Eric Johnson's work, and our partnership with the Project Delivery Group is taking us forward. As you can imagine, lots of electrical engineering involved in understanding that, and then partnership with David Woodson's group, Jeremy Park, as we move forward relative to the solarization of the East Campus parking lots and making sure how we grid tie is going to work both for the small pilot project and going to work for the larger solar canopy as we go forward. And so you can hear the partnership inside of facilities relative to pulling off a small but mighty project that will take us into the future.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Annie. Erin, you got your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick question. It's awesome about the addition of the solar canopy, right? And more of that coming. Like, how will that work with the parking spaces? Will those still be hourly, like for people, or how does it work on the permit hourly end of things?
Right now, no changes to the programming of those spaces. We actually even considered ICA's concerns for the 7 high holy days of football as well. We think these are going to be well sought after tailgate spaces for everything but our RVs, because our RVs, will be probably a little taller than the canopy. But folks that aren't coming in RVs that want shelter during a game and are tailgating in our lots, I think are going to be just people are going to rush to those first in the lot. But no changes right now for the programming of that, other than we will be adding vehicle charging to those areas. So as we add charging spaces, obviously folks that have electric and or plug-in electric vehicles will limit our charging spots to those type of vehicles. So that's really the only programmatic impacts were happening. More fun for the tailgaters, dedicated spots for chargers, but no real difference in terms of the cost of those spaces. Also, an important thing to note is, and I really want folks to hear that the improvements that we're making in the parking lot are falling on transportation services to pay for in terms of the parking budget, and the improvements we're making relative to purchasing electric vehicles then move on to our rental customers. In that, if our rental customers had to bear the infrastructure costs, no one would want an electric vehicle. But we made the determination that because we are improving our parking infrastructure by adding these, also a side benefit of canopies is that it actually will make our asphalt last longer. That parking is picking up the costs associated with the infrastructure. And it's a win-win. And a
Thank
win
you.
for the planet.
Awesome. Yeah, you guys are making incredible progress. I'm really impressed. I had two questions. One is, I assume you're going to charge for charging for personal non-fleet vehicles if they charge in those future available spaces that may be open to the public.
So Danny just made a presentation to me, first step, relative to our charging infrastructure. Very impressed with how we're moving on all different swim lanes. And the simple answer is yes. Our fleet charging, of course, is going to be a part of the infrastructure and no charge. And then, Danny, why don't you just share a little bit about what we've selected, just a thimbleful of information about that.
Yeah, we obviously met with all the big companies, decided to go with Blink. They have a really good fleet charger, at least level 2. For our public facing ones, they do have a little bit stronger level 2 that's able to accept credit cards and all different kind of app payments and whatnot. And so the idea is, right now we have 103 charging stations. About 20 of them are for the public. Most are for fleet. But as we revamp all these sites and get new chargers, we'll standardize everywhere and upgrade these chargers. Yeah.
Oh, great. Good. My other question was, I'm thinking about sort of some of the things that have been discussed in the other committees in the travel working group, and Danny, I think you and I and Anne talked about this a couple of months ago at a meeting, but maybe not. Have you all ever looked into how many trips employees or faculty or whatnot have taken where they could have rented a fleet, like a U-Car, but haven't?
That is a wonderful question. That question is about 10 years old. And no, I'm saying it's a great one, that it's recirculating back. There was an initiative at one point, Lisa, relative to this harkens to even a little bit, has a little connectivity with Maryland's project, but that is for mileage reimbursements in terms of the university when folks request mileage reimbursements. It is an untamed territory because there is enormous benefit and enormous cost savings that can happen, much less positive impact to the planet if Danny, so wait for it, is an initiative that we really push the difference between using a university vehicle versus seeking a reimbursement for travel. And that if we could do the data analysis, and it would be not our data, it's held by the reimbursements associated with travel for university purposes, is that we really believe that that's an uncharted wilderness that we could gain, encouraging folks to utilize an electric university vehicle for their travel costs versus maybe the combustion engine car that they have at home, and the reimbursements. Not only would their department save money because it would be a less cost in terms of operation for even very small trips in terms of cost savings for departments. So it's a marketing opportunity, but data that we don't have our hands around, and it hasn't come up often in the last decade, really. And so it's an area we can go into, say, why take your own car when you can take one of ours? We've had a successful U-Car program, and so a lot of trips are taken through our U-Car program, but there are also still an enormous amount of reimbursements that could actually, the trip could have been taken on in a university vehicle.
Thanks, Anne. Yeah, I know Marilyn, as she's been, she's the project manager for our GHG inventory project with Cascadia, has asked for that data. I don't know that we've gone so far as to go down to the level of assessment of what trips were reimbursed versus could have been done with the UCAR. But I think that would actually be a good, and I'm going to put it on our sort of to-do list as a specific action item, sort of the collective we. I think it would be a great thing to look at for the sustainability action plan, the next version, because that could potentially be a, you know, again, even though we're looking at fleet emissions as a percentage of our large emissions is very small, the nominal amount of emissions from fleet and from trips is still significant. So
yes, and one of the things that is a side benefit of doing something like this, even if we can't control behavior through saying please don't or mandating it, is people fall in love with electric vehicles. It's mostly how people have fallen in love with the UPass. Once you actually ride transit and you get on it and you realize how easy it is to use your UPass versus finding a parking space. The same happens when folks use an electric vehicle and they may never have driven one. They may not be resistant, but that's like, wow, this Bolt is amazing. And it actually changes behaviors and changes purchasing down the stream. So we could have some amazing side benefits way beyond the university in terms of adoption of electric vehicles.
great, thanks, Anne. Any other comments, questions for Danny? Okay, well, thanks so much, Danny, and Transportation Services. Great presentation and really great work. So we do have, in terms of our next Sustainability Action Plan Executive Committee meeting, it is scheduled for Wednesday, July 26th. That's actually going to be a hybrid meeting, and a good portion of that, we will have some catch up on some standard sort of business items, but we'll have an update from the CSF program, in part because we haven't done that in quite a while, but also because Kyle, who's the head of the CSF program, is stepping down at the end of the summer and moving on to other opportunities. And he's been really here since the inception of the program and built it up. And I wanted to have the chance to honor him and have people come and say goodbye for those that have worked with him closely. So just a heads up on what we're doing in July. All right. Well, you get some extra time back in your day unless anyone has anything else. All right. Thanks all. Take it easy.
Thank you.